Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Watts, your instructor for the American Lit Survey, and yes, this is what I really look like as opposed to that little cartoon character on my lame introductory video that you watched earlier. Today I'd like to talk to you some more in depth about Walt Whitman and Emily Dickinson. I hope on the screen before you you can see the goals or the kind of learning outcomes for this particular uh, week. Seems huge, right? For the first week of the semester to just plunge you into these two major writers and then slather on you some very detailed learning outcomes. But I feel as if you can do it, and I'll be here to try to help you any way I can. In the other video, I showed you this painting by John Gast and jokingly called this The Spirit of Manifest Destiny. The painting is actually entitled American Progress, and it's a great icon for the spirit of America in the early 1800s, from 1820 to 1850s. Of course, the literary icons who were speaking at the same time, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, and other transcendentalists, presented in their writing a verbal celebration of this manifest destiny, the idea that Providence had laid out before America, the new nation, huge expanse of land, natural resources, simply unlimited potential. And that kind of spirit of expansion and hopeful growth filtered into the writing. So that those poets like Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau distilled that boundless optimism as a boundless optimism of human potential as well. If we wanted to understand Romanticism, we could spend the entire rest of the semester and still not have it all accomplished, but there are some general characteristics of the spirit of Romanticism informing art and literature, and I placed those on the screen before you, or some of them at least. These are the values that were championed by Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, Louisa May Alcott, and Branson Alcott, and some of the other transcendentalists. So the first thing about Romanticism is there's a place of value on feeling and intuition rather than scientific inquiry. That doesn't mean scientific inquiry is out the window, but in keeping with the Romantics' idea that the life of the interior life is most important, close scrutiny of individual thought processes really mattered a great deal. Along with that, the Romantics valued the imagination over external reality. There was a sense during this era that what was man-made, particularly in terms of civilization, massive cities were corrupt and dehumanizing. So on the flip side of that, many of the Romantics believed that nature was good, civilization was bad, and nature was a way to get in touch with the supernatural presence, God, many of them called it, but then Emerson also called this supernatural presence the oversoul. Closely akin with that is the notion among many of the Romantics that educational sophistication, particularly if it becomes pretentious and highfalutin, is and that's not good. Youthful innocence is good. The common man is good, and the language and habits, vernacular and local color are also good. And then finally, I mentioned on the screen that the Romantics believed individual freedom was extremely important, and that social structure, society, and the philosophy upon which the United States was founded, the greatest good for the greatest number, didn't necessarily preserve and protect the integrity of the individual. Well, then, bam, along comes the Civil War, and you can definitely see I know you've studied the Civil War in the past and focused on slavery and economic clash and conflict, but you can also see how that spirit of focus on the individual and this "you ain't the boss of me" kind of philosophy led to folks clashing with each other. And the Civil War was, as you know, a bloody, gruesome conflict upon the soil belonging to the newly formed United States. And that war changed the nature of literature, and it changed the mindset of many of the aspiring writers who wanted to define an American literature after the war. So it's in this climate of political and personal unrest that Walt Whitman and Emily Dickinson got started in their literary careers. They wrote before and during the Civil War, and much of their writing records that angst, still the celebration of the primacy of the individual, but deep and dark concerns about the state of people's interior life, and of course the carnage and the death and the destruction around them. After the Civil War, both writers continued to revise and write new pieces that both championed the individual and sought some kind of spiritual and personal healing. As you know from the email you received, Emily Dickinson's answer to many of those struggles was to turn inward. Her verses are short, concise, even overly terse, enigmatic, and hard to get to because of all that she leaves out. Walt Whitman, on the other hand, celebrated the individual in the sense that he believed the individual person was the representation of all that the United States could be. That held within the vessel of the individual was this great potential, and that barriers, racial, sexual, cultural barriers, needed to be understood and knocked down in order for the United States and by extension the private individual to be all that he or she could be. This verse was expansive, drawn out. Whitman had very long sentences, very long attempts to follow through a thought. And we'll read the Song of Myself, which is, as the name implies, a celebration of the individual. It's divided into 52 cantos for 52 weeks in the year, and each canto tries to explore the conflicting is not really a good word, but the layering of geographic reality, of psychological reality, of sexual reality, and personal reality for the poet. I think you'll love both pieces, but I'm going to stop this video here. It's getting kind of long, and you need a chance to do some of the reading before we pursue more of those goals we projected at the beginning. Email me if you have a question. And do recall that even though you're taking the course online, I want to know you and I want to help you, and that's why you're paying me. So, hey, happy reading!